Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel. In today's share, we will be learning Daf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph. The truth is that today's share I think will be a little bit of a shorter share because in the previous share I covered more than the Dirshu page. So, okay, I'm sure nobody will complain if the share is a bit smaller today, a bit shorter than it usually is. So, we are holding the Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel. We're continuing to learn Erev Shabbos. We pick up today with a new Siman, Daf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, Siman Reish Nun Beis. Our learning should be a schus for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael Hanesunim Batzara Ubashivya Ha'imdim Bein Bayam Ubein Bayabasha Hamakayim Yerachem Aleihem V'Yitziim Mitzar L'Rvacha Me'afela La'ira Umishibud L'Geula Hashta Bagala Uvizman Kariv V'Naimar Amen. So Siman Reish Nun Beis. We've already learned in Siman Reish Nun Aleph the concept that there is melachah that you're not allowed to do on Erev Shabbos. Here in Siman Reish Nun Beis, we're going to be dealing with a slightly different concept. Says the Mechaber here, Din melachais hamutarim v'ha'asurim lahaskil be'erev Shabbos. Melachas that some melachas are permissible, some melachas are forbidden, to begin them, to put them into play on Erev Shabbos, Kidei shiyu nigmarim b'Shabbos, so that they should become completed on Shabbos. Uboy zayin seifim, and here we have 7 seifim. Now, what are we talking about over here? So, we're talking here about a melachah that you're going to start on Erev Shabbos. So you're going to put the melachah into play on Erev Shabbos. Then you're going to walk away from it, and you're going to leave it alone. The melachah is going to continue without you, and the melachah is going to become performed on Shabbos without your active participation. So, for example, the Mechaber is going to give us some different examples over here. One example the Mechaber is going to give is somebody who's making ink. Now, the way they used to make ink was they took some dry ingredients that you need to make the ink, they put them into water, and they would soak these dry ingredients in water. What would happen over time is the dry ingredients absorb the water and become combined with the water, and it forms a mass. Then they would take that mass, they would dry that mass, and then they would scrape it, and they would mix that into another liquid base to form ink, to manufacture ink that you can use to write with. So, in the beginning of this process, you take the dry ingredients, you put them into a keli, and then you put water into the dry ingredients. What's going to happen is the water is going to get absorbed, it's going to form a mass. You know what melachah that is? That's the melachah of lush. That's the melachah of using liquid as a binding agent. You're taking dry ingredients, and then you're adding a liquid to use as a binding agent to go ahead and form a mass. The same way normally you take flour, and you mix flour and water, and the separate independent grains of flour, right, they combine through the liquid binding agent, and it forms a dough. It forms a mass. Now, typically when you think of a challah dough, you think of mixing the flour and the water and actively kneading it. But this is also a form of lush. If you mix the dry ingredients with a liquid binding agent, and then you leave it alone, and the water becomes absorbed and it forms a mass, that is also a form of lush. Now, what we're going to discuss over here is, you want to start the process on Erev Shabbos. So on Erev Shabbos, you're going to take your dry ingredients, and you're going to soak them in water. The lush didn't really happen yet. Now you walk away. You leave it on your workbench. You work away. You walk away. But now the dry ingredients are going to continue to soak, and over time, going into Shabbos and on Shabbos, it's going to absorb the water, and it's going to form the mass. That's going to complete the melachah of lush. So you're putting the melachah into play. You're beginning the melachah on Erev Shabbos, that the melachah actually is being done on Shabbos without your active participation. Are you allowed to do that or not? Are you allowed to start a melachah rolling on Erev Shabbos when that melachah is going to happen on Shabbos? Again, it's happening without your active participation, but you put it into play on Erev Shabbos. Are you allowed to do that? So we're going to see there are some instances where yes, some instances where no. So let's begin here with Sif Aleph, says the Mechaber. Mutter lahaschil b'melacha be'erev Shabbos. You are permitted to begin a malacha on Erev Shabbos. Samuch lechashecha, even all the way up to right before Shkia, before the Zman. You're allowed to start a malacha. Afal pi she'ena yachal legamra miba'od yom, even though the malacha is not going to be completed on Erev Shabbos. V'hi nigmeres me'eleha b'Shabbos. So in the case of soaking the ingredients of the ink, you are beginning the malacha on Erev Shabbos, but the lush is not going to take place on Erev Shabbos at a time when malacha is mutter. The lush is actually going to take place on Shabbos when lush is a meleches iser. Still, says the Mechaber, you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to start the ball rolling, even samuch lechashecha, even right before the Zman. You're allowed to start the ball rolling, even though the malacha is not going to become complete on Erev Shabbos. The malacha is going to become complete on Shabbos when that malacha is aser. But you're allowed to start the ball rolling on Erev Shabbos. Kigoyin, for example, says the Mechaber, lishrois diyoy v'samimonim b'mayim. So the first example I already told you. If you take the dry ingredients of diyoy, of ink, or you take the dry ingredients, you take samimonim, which are herbs and other plant matter, you're going to soak it in water to make dye. Also, it could involve the malacha of lush, because also it could form a mass. Some say that it involves the malacha of tzvia, of dyeing. We'll see. V'heim nishrim kol Shabbos. Now, what's going to happen over here is this mixture of the water and these dry ingredients are going to soak on Shabbos, and the malacha of lush is actually going to take place on Shabbos. That's one example. Another example, says the Mechaber, V'laseis unin, pirish agudois, unin are bundles. V'laseis unin shel pishtan, you're allowed to take bundles of flax and put them latanur, you're allowed to put them in an oven, kedei sheyislabnu. In the manufacture of linen, one of the steps of linen is, after you have the fibers of the linen separated from the plant, now it's time to bleach them. One method that they had for bleaching linen was to put it in a hot oven, and the heat would have the effect of whitening and bleaching the linen. So you're allowed to take the linen, you're allowed to put it into the tanner, into the oven, on Erev Shabbos. Now, when you put the linen into the oven on Erev Shabbos, it doesn't instantly turn white. When is it going to turn white? It's going to turn white over Shabbos. It's going to sit in the oven over Shabbos and become white. Now, whitening the linen is a malacha. It's the malacha of malabein. It's the malacha of whitening something. That's one of the lamites malachas. So you're starting the ball rolling on Erev Shabbos. You're putting the linen, the flax, into the oven on Erev Shabbos, but the malacha of malabein is going to take place on Shabbos, albeit without your active participation. And therefore, says the Mechaber, it's mutter to put it in on Erev Shabbos. Now we have another example. Veloseis tsemer l'soich hayoira. Or you could take wool and you could put it into a vat. This is a dyer's vat. You have a vat that has dye in it. Now, does one of the lamites malachas is tzvia, is dyeing, coloring a fabric. So you're taking tsemer, you're putting it into the dyeing vat. The tzvia doesn't take place immediately when you put it in the vat. It has to soak in the dye. You're allowed to put the tsemer, the wool, into the dyer's vat right before Shabbos, even though the tzvia is going to take place later on Shabbos. So again, you're starting the ball rolling on Erev Shabbos. The malacha is going to happen on Shabbos. But since it's without your active participation, the Mechaber is saying this is mutter. Now, in this last case, the Mechaber gives us two very important caveats. So what are you doing over here? You're taking the tsemer and you're putting it into the dyer's vat. Now, the dyer's vat, this is not just a vat full of cold dye. You need heat. In order to complete the dyeing process, the tsemer has to be in the vat with the dye, and it has to be hot. So you're putting it into a cooking vat of dye. Says the Mechaber, there's another issue that we have to deal with over here. There are two other issues that we have to deal with over here besides the melachah of tzviyah. In the context of Siman Reish Nun Beis, the chiddush that the Mechaber is telling you is you're allowed to put the tzemer into the yoira on Erev Shabbos, even though the melachah of tzviyah is going to take place on Shabbos. So you're causing on Erev Shabbos that the melachah of tzviyah should take place on Shabbos. That's mutter. But there are two very important caveats. Caveat number one, says the Mechaber, she'ena al ha'esh. First of all, this yoira, this vat, cannot be on the fire. You can't leave the vat on the fire on Shabbos. Second caveat, v'hitucha betit, and the cover of the vat has to be sealed onto the vat with clay. You need those two caveats. Why? Explains the Mechaber. She'im al ha'esh, if the vat is actually on the fire, usher. It would be usher for you to have the vat on the fire on Shabbos. Why? Shema yechate, because we're afraid that you might come to stoke the coals that are under the vat. You set up a dyeing vat on the fire before Shabbos. When you're going to walk by the dyeing vat Friday night or Shabbos morning, you want to know that it's cooking well, that the tzemer is going to get dyed well. So you might go ahead and you might be mechate, you might go ahead and stir up the coals. So if you're going to set up this dyeing vat before Shabbos, it cannot be on the fire because Aser Shema Yechate. Pirish, the Ramah explains, what does this mean, Shema Yechate? Pirish Yegale, you might uncover the Ya'ir HaGecholim and stir up and stoke the coals b'machta with a shovel. What does it mean to uncover them? So anybody who does good old-fashioned grilling with charcoal briquettes knows that when they're burning for a while, they get ashed over. And when they get ashed over, you lose heat. So you bang them, you shake them up a little, you shake the covering of the ash off the briquettes and you get more heat. So we have two worries over here when it comes to the dyer's vat that's on the fire. You might go ahead and stoke up the coals, and by stoking up the coals, you're trying to accomplish two things. One is you're uncovering those burning coals, you're getting the ash off, and you're stoking it up, which aerates the burning coals, and you get more heat out of it. And we're afraid you're going to do that on Shabbos, and that would be an Issa Daraisa. So that's one thing. The vat cannot be on the fire. Then there's another caveat that the Mechaber said, which is that the cover of the vat has to be sealed on with clay. Why does it have to be sealed on with clay? Explains the Mechaber. Va'afilu eina al ha'esh, even if the vat is not on the fire, im eina tucha betit, if the cover of the vat is not sealed on with clay, Aser, this would also be Aser. Why? Because of another problem. Shemi yogis ba bekaf. We're afraid that on Shabbos you might take a big ladle, a big spoon, and you might stick it into the vat, and you might stir the vat. Again, the reason you're doing this is to make sure that the wool should become well dyed. V'hamegis b'kedera, and stirring a boiling pot, stirring a cooking pot, afilu ein al ha'esh, even if the pot's not on the fire, chayiv mishum mevashel. That would be an issa daraisa of mevashel. Okay, so let's stop over here for the moment. What have we seen over here so far? What we've seen over here so far is the Mechaber is discussing cases where you want to do an action, you want to do a Maisa on Erev Shabbos, and that's going to put into play a melachah that's going to take place on Shabbos without your active participation. So you want to go ahead and you want to put the dry ingredients of dye or of ink, you want to mix it together with water on Erev Shabbos, and then you want to walk away. On Shabbos, it's going to soak, it's going to combine with the water, and the melachah of lush is going to be performed. You want to go ahead, you want to take bundles of flax, and you want to put them in the oven on Erev Shabbos. On Shabbos, they're going to become bleached, and the melachah of malabain is going to take place. Again, without your active participation. Or, you want to take wool, you want to put it into a hot cooking dyer's vat, you want to put it in on Erev Shabbos. What's going to happen? On Shabbos, the tzemer, the wool, is going to take the color of the dye, and the melachah of tzviyah is going to be performed. In all of these cases, the Mechaber said, it's mutter. You're allowed to put these melachas into play on Erev Shabbos. by the last one, by putting the wool into the dyer's vat, the Mechaber gives us two very important caveats. The Mechaber tells us, first of all, the vat cannot be on the fire on Shabbos. Why? Because if the vat's on the fire on Shabbos, we're afraid that on Shabbos you're going to be concerned that it's cooking well, so you're going to be mechateh the gacholim, you're going to stoke the coals. That would be an issa daraisa. Also, the lid of the vat, even though it's removed from the fire, the lid of the vat has to be sealed on with clay. Why? Because if it's not, you might open it on Shabbos and you might stir the pot, and that would be the isser of bishul, even though the pot's not on the fire. Okay. A lot of information. Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Cotton Aleph, Lishrois Diyoi. You're allowed to soak the dry ingredients of ink and of dye. Ubishabbos aser mishum megabel. On Shabbos, the Gemara Shabbos Daf Yud Ches Amud Aleph tells us that to do this on Shabbos, to put together the dry ingredients and the water on Shabbos, that would be also mishum megabel. That would be the isser of kneading, like lush. That would be the isser of forming a mass. Shama arev ha'diyoi v'hamayim yachad, because you're combining the dry ingredients of the diyoi and the water together. V'yesh oimrim da'aser mishum tzeveya. There are those that say that there's an additional isser over here of when you soak the dry ingredients of the dye or of the ink in water, and that is the isser of tzeveya, of dyeing. Why? Because when you take the dry ingredients and you mix them with water, what happens is the water becomes colored. So you're dyeing the water. Now, there are those that say that this is not the isser of tzeveya. Why? Because when you mix these dry ingredients with the water, you're not interested in dyeing the water. That's not what you're trying to do. You're manufacturing a dye, or you're manufacturing an ink that's going to be used to color something else. But your goal over here is not to color the water. So there are those that say that this is not the Isser Tzeveya, it's only the Isser of Megabel or Lush. But in any case, what we see over here is that to do this on Shabbos would entail an Isser. But you're doing it before Shabbos. Afilu hachi, keven shemaschil bizman hamuter be'erev Shabbos. Since you're putting it into play on Erev Shabbos, you're starting the ball rolling on Erev Shabbos. Umimela nigmar hapu'ula b'Shabbos, and the melachah is going to be completed on Shabbos, but it's going to be completed mimela. It's going to be completed on its own without your active participation. Shari, therefore, the Mechaber says this is mutter. V'chein b'kol hanin tekachoshev. And the same is true of all the examples that we're giving over here. Yesh behen iser da'araisa kisha oisa oisam b'Shabbos. They all entail meleches iser da'araisa should you do them on Shabbos. You want to take the flax and put it into the tanur on Shabbos, that would be the iser da'araisa of malabein to do it on Shabbos. You want to put the tzemer in the yoira on Shabbos, that would entail the iser da'araisa of tzviya on Shabbos. But you're doing it on Erev Shabbos. The melachah is happening memela without your active participation on Shabbos. Shari. Since you're starting the ball rolling on Erev Shabbos when there are no isurim, this is mutter. If we have time at the end of this year, I'll read to you some interesting points from one of the Dirshu footnotes. Mishnah Berurah's cotton bays shall pishton lataner. You want to take bundles of flax and put it in the oven. Afilu ein tuach kisuyoi betit. Mishnah Berurah is pointing out something very interesting over here. When we talk about putting the wool into the dyer's vat, over there we had two very important caveats. One of them was that the lid of the vat has to be sealed on with clay, because we're afraid if it's not, you might take the cover off and you might stir the pot. But over here, when we're talking about putting the flax in the oven, we don't say that the door of the oven has to be sealed with clay. No, we could leave the door of the oven alone. The Mishnah Berurah points out what the difference is. Says the Mishnah Berurah's cotton bays, over here, by putting the flax into the tanur, afilu ein tuach kisrei betit, even if the lid of the oven is not sealed with clay, afilu hachi loy chashinan shemi yegala hakisoi v'yechata begacholim. When it comes to putting the flax in the oven, we're not afraid that you might open the door of the oven and stoke the coals in the oven. Why not? We're afraid of it by the vat. because the keven do haruach kasha lehen, because the physical facts are that opening the door of the oven when the flax is in the oven being bleached damages the flax. And therefore you're not going to open the door, because I'm going to ruin the flax if I open the door. So we don't have to worry that you might open the door. I've cut gimel. You're allowed to put the wool into the dyer's vat. When you put the wool into the dyer's vat, what happens? The wool takes on the color of the dye. This is the issa daraisa, the melachah daraisa of tzvia. But you're allowed to do it because you're starting the ball rolling on Erev Shabbos, and it's happening memela on Shabbos. Ois Cotton Dalit, the Mechaber said that you're only allowed to do this if the vat is going to be removed from the fire. You cannot have the vat on the fire. Why? Because if the vat's on the fire, osir shema yechate, we're afraid that you might come to stoke the coals underneath the vat. Says the Mishnah Berurah, cotton dalit, also shemi yachate. Hainu afilu yesh man sheyiklait einat seva mibayon. We're worried that you might stoke the coals under the vat, even if you put the wool in the vat early enough on Erev Shabbos that really there's enough time for the dyeing to be complete on Erev Shabbos. It's still also to leave the vat on the fire on Shabbos because we're still afraid that you might stoke the coals. Why? Because we're still afraid, even though you did it a bunch of hours before Shabbos, the recipe says leave the wool in the vat on the fire for 3 hours. You already had it on for 3 hours. You're still not allowed to leave it on the fire on Shabbos because we're still afraid that on Shabbos you might come to stoke the coals to make sure that it really got done well. Okay, now Mishnah Berurah Ice Cut Hay is an interesting Mishnah Berurah here. The second caveat that the Mechaber gave us by the dyer's vat is that the lid of the vat has to be sealed on with clay. And the Mechaber explained why is that. Because we're afraid if the lid is not sealed, you might take the lid off and you might stir the pot. And the Mechaber told us stirring the pot would be an Isser Daraisa of Mevashel, even though the pot's not on the fire. Now let's remember, that was the first caveat. The first caveat that the Mechaber gave was the yoira, the vat, cannot be on the fire. So we're dealing with a vat that's removed from the fire. Yet the Mechaber says that you need to seal the lid on with clay because if you don't, we're afraid you're going to take the lid off and you're going to stir the pot. And stirring the pot, even though it's removed from the fire, would be an Isser of Mevashel. So now the Mishnah Berurah points out something interesting. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Shema v'hamegis. We're afraid that you might open the vat and stir the vat, and that would be Osir because stirring the vat is an Issa Daraisa Mevashel, even though it's removed from the fire. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Hine, after HaMechaber Hishva Hagosa B'yoira LaHagosa B'Kdeira, the Mechaber seems to be equating over here stirring a vat that has wool in it that's being dyed. He's equating that to the halacha of somebody who's megis b'kedera. Now, kedera is not a yoira. There's a yoira and a kedera. A yoira is a vat. The vat, the yoira, is used for non-edible substances. This is a yoira that's a dyer's vat. A kedera is a pot. When we talk about a kedera, we're talking about a pot full of food. When you look at the Mechaber that way, what's the Mechaber saying? The Mechaber is saying you need to seal the yoira, because if you don't seal the yoira, you might uncover it and you might stir it. And, says the Mechaber, that would be mavashel. Why? Because we all know that stirring a kedera full of food is considered bishul, right? And it sounds like even if it's removed from the fire. So he seems to be equating these two halachas. He's equating the halacha of stirring a yoira that has wool in it and stirring a pot that has food in it. Points out the Mishnah Berurah that there's really a very key difference between those two halachas. The halacha of those two cases are not the same, even though the Mechaber sounds like they're the same. Points out the Mishnah Berurah, they're not really the same. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in hay. Even though the mechaber is equating the halacha of stirring a vat full of wool that's being dyed to stirring a pot that's full of food, a pot of chicken soup, Einay Shava Legamri. Points out the Mishnah Berurah, these two cases are not really equal. They're not really the same. The B'Kedera, by a pot full of food, Imihi Mevushelas Kol Tzarchai, if it's fully cooked, if you cooked your chicken soup on Erev Shabbos, and now the hot pot is there on Shabbos, if it's Mevushelas Kol Tzarchai, it's fully cooked, Su Les Be'Yisura, there really would not be any Isser involved in stirring that pot on Shabbos. Because what are you doing? You're stirring a pot of fully cooked food. How is that bishul? We know the halacha is ein bishul achar bishul. So if the soup is fully cooked and now you go stir it on Shabbos, how could you tell me that you're doing bishul? Ein bishul achar bishul. The food is already fully cooked, so there's no bishul. V'ilu b'yoyreh, but by the wool in the vat, aser b'chol gavna lahagispa. But by the wool in the vat, it is aser to stir the pot, even if there was enough time for the color of the dye to take hold in the wool. The reason for that is because by the fully cooked food, ein bishul achar bishul. Once it's bevushel called tzarchai, we say that there's no benefit gained by going ahead and stirring the pot. You're not accomplishing anything. Therefore, it's not an isser of bishul. But by the wool in the yoyreh, even if there was enough time for the wool to take hold of the color of the dye, you're still accomplishing by stirring the pot. Because you still can add a little color. There still might be a tiny spot somewhere on the wool that wasn't fully colorized. So this is a key difference in these two halachas. Like we're going to learn when we learn the halachas of bishul. Valkain, and therefore, also therefore, because of this difference, you should realize that you're not allowed to put the tzemer into a cooking pot of dye if it's close to Shabbos, if the lid is not going to be sealed on with clay, even if there really was enough time for the wool to get colorized before Shabbos starts. Because we're afraid that you might stir the pot already on Shabbos. But again, here you have this difference between the pot of food and the pot of yoyreh. Now what's coming out from this Mishnah Berurah, from reading this Mishnah Berurah, it seems very clear that if you have a hot pot of fully cooked food, and it's hot on Shabbos, and it's off the flame for sure, going ahead and mixing it is no problem at all. Why would there be any problem mixing it? Ain't bishul achar bishul. You're not accomplishing anything. It's not a problem. By the vat with wool in it, it would be a problem, even though it's removed from the fire, because you're benefiting the wool by mixing it. Now, how about if you have a pot of fully cooked food, but it's not off the fire? If you have a pot of fully cooked food, so you have the chicken soup Friday night, it was on the flame for 4 hours, 5 hours on Erev Shabbos. It is completely cooked. It's not even mitztamek v'yafaloi. It's fully cooked. Now, on Shabbos, you have it on the fire, and you want to go ahead and mix it. Are you allowed to do that? So that, when we learn Siman Shin Yud Ches, we're going to see a Shar Tzion, who's going to bring down from the Magen Avram. The Magen Avram, I think it's an El Yerabba also, says that would be aser. Even though it's fully cooked, if it's on the fire, you're not allowed to stir it. We'll deal with that in greater detail, as Hashem Yisbarach, when we get to Siman Shin Yud Ches. Okay, let's just do a little bit more over here. Continues the Mechaber in the bottom line. The Mechaber says, Umutar lifrais mitzudais chaya v'oifais v'dagim. You're allowed to set traps for chayos, for non-domesticated animals like a deer, v'oifais, or fowl, I guess to catch a turkey or a chicken, v'dagim, or fish. You could set nets to catch fish on Erev Shabbos, v'heim nitzudim b'Shabbos. Even though they're going to become trapped, so the melachah of tzeda is actually going to take place on Shabbos. Again, you're allowed to put the melachah into play. You're allowed to set the trap on Erev Shabbos, even though the trapping is going to take place on Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Zayin mitzudas chaya u b'Shabbos. How about if you set a trap on Shabbos? So you go, you take a net, and you dip it down into the water on Shabbos. Now, what's that halacha? By putting the net in the water, am I doing the melachah of tzad? I didn't trap anything yet. I mean, if I take the net and I catch a fish, I'm doing tzad. How do I take a trap? I take an animal trap, right? Those big traps that they have, let's say, to catch raccoons or stuff. I take the trap, and I put in the bait, and I put it out on Shabbos. There's not a raccoon in sight. Am I over tzad? How am I being over tzad? I'm not trapping anything. So what's the halacha over here if you do this on Shabbos? All the other ones we saw, if you do the melachas on Shabbos, if you would take the flax and put it in the oven on Shabbos, that would be performing the Issa D'Oraisa of Malabe. But over here, you take a trap with peanut butter in it, and you put it outside. You're doing the Issa D'Oraisa of Tzad? Says the Mishnah Berurah, Eis Katan Zayin, Ub'Shabbos, if you do this on Shabbos, Imu Oisikein Ub'Shas Prisasai Nichtas Akaya L'Soicha, if you actually take the trap and put out the trap and catch an animal, the animal comes right away into the trap. Ubeshas prisasai, when you set the trap, nichtas achayil l'soicha, the animal comes into the trap. Chayiv mishum tzeda. That's when you would be over the Issa D'Oraisa of tzeda. But if it doesn't come in right away, you're not over the Issa D'Oraisa of tzeda. Says there's a Dirshu footnote over here. Dirshu footnote number 5. Avalim nichtas achayil l'soicha metzuda la'achazman. If you put out the trap and 2 hours later an animal comes into the trap, we're going to see in Shin Tes Zayin, Hashem Yisbarach, we'll see that that's only an Issa D'Rabbanan. Now, ubegeder shas prisas hametzuda. How do you measure this time? What does it mean that I put it out and the animal came in right away? So I'm over the Issa Tzad D'Oraisa. What's called right away? Because of a Chazon Ish, shelo yisparish mahu. Chazon Ish says, we don't know. That information hasn't been given to us. Exactly what's called that happens right away. The Efsher, it's possible, says the Chazon Ish, shetzar sheyoichas es hametzuda biyadoi b'shas shahachai nitzaidos. It could be that you would have to actually be holding the trap when the animal comes in, or at least it's your act, it's your koyach that's actually trapping the animal. If you see the fish and you put the net on the fish, it's not that the fish came into the net. It's you put the net onto the fish. So that would zicha be Tzeda D'Oraisa. Okay, we have a few minutes over here. I'm going to read to you a piece of a footnote. It's footnote number 2. There's a few lines down into the footnote because this touches on a very contemporary and a very fascinating discussion in halacha. The Iker Chiddush in halacha that we've seen over here so far in Reish Nun Beis is the idea that you're allowed to do an action on Erev Shabbos that is going to put into play a melachah that's going to take place on Shabbos. Why is this okay? The reason it's okay is because what you're doing on Erev Shabbos is 100% mutter. There are no isurim on Erev Shabbos. The melachah that's going to happen on Shabbos is going to happen memela. It's happening completely without your active participation. So we're saying that that's mutter. That brings up a very interesting question. And that becomes the question, let's say, of Shabbos clocks. Where you want to set something, and this shaila becomes even a lot bigger nowadays with smart homes. Not sure how smart they are, but these smart homes where you have everything that's automated and everything is on Wi-Fi. You know, your vacuum cleaner is on Wi-Fi. Everything that you buy, your kid's rattle, has to be able to hook up to Wi-Fi. Otherwise, it's not considered a good enough rattle. So with these smart homes and fully automated homes, you always have the ability to set things up so that things should happen memela on Shabbos. Are you allowed to do this? Now, there's a key difference between this shaila and what we've spoken about so far here in Reish Nun Beis. You see, the cases that we've spoken about over here, you're putting the melachah into play on Erev Shabbos. You're actually starting the melachah on Erev Shabbos. So when you put the flax into the oven to do the melachah of malabein and bleach the flax, you're actually starting the melachah on Erev Shabbos. The melachah is not becoming complete until Shabbos. The malabein is being completed on Shabbos, but you are starting it on Erev Shabbos. But how about if the melachah doesn't even start on Erev Shabbos? What if you set up something with a level of automation where the melachah is not going to start on Erev Shabbos? You're going to set a clock. It's going to turn a machine on Shabbos, and the melachah is actually going to start on Shabbos. So you have an air conditioner in your window. You have it plugged into a Shabbos clock. Friday night, it's nice and cool. Shabbos, you heard it was going to be 90 degrees. You want your bedroom to be nice and cool on Shabbos afternoon so you can take a nap. Shabbos, Erev Shabbos, look at the air conditioner. It's off. It's completely off. When Shabbos begins, Ben Hashmashis, Shkia, it's completely off. Shabbos at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a half hour before you want to lay down for your nap, suddenly, boom, the air conditioner turns on. So now the melachah started on Shabbos. You didn't do anything on Shabbos, on Erev Shabbos, to start the melachah on Erev Shabbos. You maybe didn't even touch the air conditioner. You set the Shabbos clock. You set the Shabbos clock. You didn't begin the melachah. That's not beginning the melachah that the air conditioner is doing. You didn't begin the melachah. I don't want to get into the shilas of electricity. What's a melachah? What's not a melachah? That's for a different time. You understand my point. My point is, with a Shabbos clock, let's say it was a Shabbos clock on a pot of food, right? By the Shabbos clock, you're not beginning the melachah on Erev Shabbos. You're setting up an automation. You're setting up a clock that's going to begin the melachah on Shabbos. Are you allowed to do that? So if you go into the Dirshu footnote over here, Dirshu footnote number 2, a few lines in. Ubeshalos t'tshuva sigris Moshe, Rav Moshe Zechet Tzadim Kashel Vrach in the Igris writes a very famous tshuva. His stapek, he has a suffix, a doubt. Im mutter lechavein sha'in Shabbos, are you allowed to set a Shabbos clock? Kedei shetaskel leheyasais al yadai melachah b'Shabbos, so that the Shabbos clock is going to cause a melachah to begin on Shabbos. She'ulai lo yihiter ha-Shulchan Aruch, maybe the heter that we have over here in Reish Nun Beis, ela lahaskel melachah be'erev Shabbos kedei shetigamer b'Shabbos. Maybe the Bechaber's whole heter is that you're allowed to begin a malacha that will be completed on Shabbos. But who says you could set up a clock to start a malacha on Shabbos? Maybe that he wasn't matir. And even though the Rishiva Zatzal has this doubt, Kosav, he wrote in the Igris, sheyesh lesor, that we should answer the Shabbos clocks. Because certainly the Shabbos clock entails zilzul Shabbos. Shaharei ba'ofen zen nitain lasais is kol ha'malachos aseres b'Shabbos. Because the Rishiva Zatzal said, if we're going to be matir this type of automation, then there could be no Shabbos left. Because especially now, you see it b'chush. Now you see the smart homes. You could have a smart factory. You could have your computer with your Wi-Fi and everything buzzing, and suddenly on Shabbos, at the prescribed time, all the machines are going to turn on, all the robots are going to turn on, and the whole factory is going to run on Shabbos. What do you mean? I didn't do any malacha. I didn't do anything. I set up everything on Erev Shabbos. Everything's happening memela on Shabbos. I could mamish. It said the Rishiva Zatzal, so that means there won't be any Shabbos. Ve'en lecha zilzul b'kvayda Shabbos gadol mizeh. Rav Moshe wrote, there is no bigger zilzul Shabbos than this. You're telling me that you could automate everything. If you think about it in your own home, I don't even like to picture it. Somebody is sitting in his house, and he could set up his coffee machine. His coffee machine is going to go on at 9 o'clock in the morning. His drip coffee maker, his Keurig, is going to go and make his nice, fresh coffee. I'm sure there are machines that could go generate eggs for you on Shabbos, and then you could have the television go on, so you could watch whatever you want to watch while you're eating your breakfast, and then you could have you could have a fully automated. A guy could have his whole house fully automated. Everything that he wants is all happening automatically on Shabbos, and Shabbos becomes Tuesday. So Eilecha Zilzal becomes Shabbos. Gadol Mizu. And the Rishiva Zatzal writes, he goes so far, he says, Ubarer, he says, it's clear to me, Shem Haya Shayin Shabbos B'Mer Tanoim V'Amaroim, if the Tanoim and Amaroim would have seen a Shabbos clock, Hayu Oisrim as Hashimush Boy. They zichel would have answered it. U'Kamoy Shas Ramir L'Nachri. The same way they asked Amir Lakum. Amir la'akum, they based on a pasuk. Shabbos lo'isasa be'melacha. No melachah should be done. Kol melacha lo'yayasa behem. No melachah should be done on Shabbos. The pasuk doesn't say you can't do melachah. The pasuk said melachah shouldn't be done. So the Chazal took from there, Amir la'akum is aser. You can't have a nachri do malacha for you. Why? Because malacha is being done. So mali nachri, mali Shabbos clock. The same way you're not allowed to have the malacha done through the agency of the nachri, you're not allowed to have the malacha done through the agency of the Shabbos clock. V'ulai kol adavar b'ser amir l'nachri. The Rosh Hashanah questions. It could be that the whole gzera of Amir la'akum includes Shabbos clocks. Now, if you go to the next paragraph, he says over here, Omnam, Le'inyan adlakas ha'or al yedei sha'oin b'Shabbos, to use the Shabbos clock to turn on the lights. Kosev sham shekevich kvar nagu ha'olam lasis kain. The Rosh Hashanah said it was already widespread. When he wrote this tshuva years ago, it was already widespread that people were using Shabbos clocks to turn lights on and off. Ein bazeh mishum zilzul b'kvay Shabbos. That's not a zilzul on Shabbos, since so many people know that Shabbos clocks are so prevalent that everybody does it. But he adds to that, if you go weiter in the footnote, he goes weiter, he says, but there are poskim that hold that it's not included in Amir la'akum either. There are poskim that hold that to have a guy turn on a light or turn off a light is also not Amir la'akum. So B'tziruf, combining those shittas together with the idea that maybe it's not Zilzul Shabbos because it's so widespread. What I heard from my Rebbe, Rebbe Feinstein, is that his father really was not happy with the Shabbos clocks for lights either. But he felt that it was something that he couldn't aser. It had already become so widespread that people were doing it. He didn't want to aser it. Certainly, he didn't want Shabbos clocks being used for air conditioners. That I know. He didn't want Shabbos clocks being used for air conditioners, so we never used them for air conditioners. But I wanted to bring up the point, just because you learn this halacha here in Reish Dun Beis, and right away it makes you think of it. Okay. Thank you so much for joining me for Limud HaTorah. Discuss of Limud HaTorah should be Megan against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbe Shem should send Yeshua Sefuras Panas Shtuchim to all those who need. We should be zeicher to see the BS called Tzedek B'Meher V'Yameinu. Amen. Be well.